If you've ever felt bloated, gassy, or uncomfortable after eating foods that should be healthy, then FODMAPs is something to pay attention to. In this video, I'll define FODMAPs, share which foods have them, and explain why a low-carb diet is naturally lower in these foods that can cause digestive issues. Fruit, milk, soda, beans, and bread. What do these foods have in common? The answer is that they contain FODMAPs. The term FODMAP is an acronym that stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, which is a mouthful and why you can see that it is easier to use the acronym. And I'll share specific foods to watch out for in a moment, but what is obvious from the foods that I just mentioned is that many of them contain healthy things like fiber, vitamins, and minerals. And this is the challenge to a person with a sensitivity to high FODMAP foods. They can think that they are eating a clean, healthy diet, yet feel bloated and gassy and be troubled by constipation and diarrhea when they eat. What FODMAP foods share in common is that they are short-chain carbohydrates that do not get digested up in your small intestine, but rather make their way down to the lower part of the digestive tract where they are fermented by certain gut bacteria. And this fermentation leads to the production of hydrogen gas, which in turn creates gas, bloating, pain, and constipation. And FODMAPs can also pull fluid into the intestines, which leads to diarrhea, so both conditions are possible. And before we look at a list of foods, I want to quickly address how FODMAPs are associated with IBS as well as fiber. If you've ever heard of FODMAPs before, you may have associated them with irritable bowel syndrome or IBS. Now, not everyone who is sensitive to these foods has been diagnosed with this condition, but because the symptoms that I just described are common to IBS sufferers and consuming these foods can trigger a flare-up, the two are linked and IBS is often treated with a low FODMAP diet. Also, one thing that you might have noticed is that FODMAPs avoid digestion until they encounter the gut bacteria, and this is how we think of fiber. However, when fiber is broken down by gut bacteria, it leads to health benefits, not pain and discomfort. The difference is that the bacteria that digest fiber produce more methane than hydrogen. And this methane production, it might still leave you feeling a bit gassy, but it's not going to lead to the other symptoms. Now, trying to avoid FODMAPs is a challenge because there can be acceptable and unacceptable foods within a food group. For instance, a person who is sensitive to FODMAPs might feel bloated or gassy after eating a pear, but tolerate other fruits like blueberries without issues. Likewise, they might be able to eat some dairy products like hard cheese, but feel bad after drinking a glass of milk. And this is why, if you are feeling discomfort after eating, that you might want to take a broader diet approach and follow a low-carb or keto diet. Because as you'll see in a moment, many of the foods to avoid are high-carb foods. Now, I'll show a full list of high FODMAP foods here on screen and on my blog post by the same name as this video. That blog post can be found on my website, drbeckyfitness.com. But what I want to highlight here are some popular foods that may cause digestive problems for sensitive people. Fruits that are high in FODMAPs include apples, pears, peaches, and watermelon. Popular vegetables include asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower, and onions. Most beans and bread items are high in FODMAPs, as are some dairy products, including cow's milk, some yogurts, and softer cheeses like ricotta or cottage cheese. Drinks that you may need to avoid include beer, certain wines, and sodas that have been sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, as well as foods and drinks that are sweetened with sugar alcohols like maltitol or xylitol. And as a side note, we see sugar alcohols used in a lot of keto-friendly snacks because sugar alcohols can be subtracted from the total carbs to lower the net carb count of the snack. So just be aware that this is a tricky thing used by low-carb food manufacturers and is something that I discussed in my video on low-carb snacks that actually stop cravings. Now, when we look at foods that are high in FODMAPs, we see that with the exception of dairy products, that they come from plants. And we know that plants are the living organisms that create carbohydrates through the process of photosynthesis. So it makes sense that a low FODMAP food would be naturally lower in carbohydrates. And this is backed up by research that shows that a very low carb diet is effective for reducing symptoms of IBS, which is that condition that we talked about earlier that's very closely related to these foods. So lowering carbohydrates naturally lowers FODMAPs. However, when you cut the carbs, you replace many of them with dietary fats. So how do fatty foods play into the equation? Because it seems that they could have the potential to worsen digestive symptoms. But surprisingly, fats like butter and oils do not qualify as FODMAPs and can be consumed on a low FODMAP diet. So let's put together a more complete low carb, low FODMAP diet. Besides fats and oils, a low carb dieter can enjoy meat, fish or seafood, poultry, eggs, seeds, and most nuts, with the exceptions being cashews and pistachios. Other low FODMAP foods that fit into a low carb diet include low carb fruits like blueberries, cantaloupes, grapefruit, honeydew melon, lemons, limes, raspberries, and strawberries. Many non-starchy vegetables can stay in your diet, including celery, eggplant, green beans, tomatoes, zucchini, and certain varieties of lettuce. And some low-carb dairy products can be consumed, including some varieties of cheese, such as hard cheeses, feta and brie. And because lactose is what you're trying to avoid, lactose-free dairy products are fine to consume, as well as almond milk, which would be a dairy-free alternative. So we see that FODMAP is the name given to foods that pass through to the end of the digestive tract, where they are fermented by gut bacteria to produce hydrogen gas. In sensitive people, this causes pain, bloating, gas, and changes in bowel movements. Because many FODMAP foods contain a significant amount of carbohydrates, a low-carb diet can be a good first step to avoiding digestive discomfort. I have a list of 100 low-carb foods that you can download for free through the links here. While not all of them are low in FODMAPs, that list will serve as a good overview of low-carb friendly foods. Before you go, please hit the subscribe button, and thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video.